Hey, welcome everybody to Epic Life Church for our Sunday service. We are in a series currently called Focus, and we're getting into the summer pretty good. I hope you're enjoying it, and I hope that the weather actually turns a little bit more sunny and warmer. I feel like we kind of got gypped here, at least in the Portland area, with our weather in the last few weeks, but I'm looking forward to what lies ahead. Now, in this series that I mentioned that we're in called Focus, we're talking about, for the next couple of weeks, we're talking about things that if we focus on them, if they're the things that are most important, if we focus on them, they expand in our life. We move in the direction of the things that we focus on. And so that's what this series is about. And so we've picked some very particular topics that we feel like are so important that if we can focus on them, they help us to grow, they help us to move in the right direction, especially during the season right now where it feels like everything's turned upside down and we don't necessarily know what direction to go. And so last week we actually talked about practicing grace and receiving God's grace in our life. And we talked about living out radical grace in our life. And hopefully, if you tuned in, that you've already been able to put some of that into practice this week, because our world could use a little more of that right now. Today, we're going to be talking about what it means to share the hope that we have in Jesus. So today's message is dubbed, Tell It Like It Is. And that's what we want to do. We want to share our faith, share our hope with other people. And we're going to talk about that today. In fact, I got a question for you, because I think this area of sharing our faith and sharing the hope that we have in Jesus it's a difficult one. It is for me, at least. I've heard many people talk about that being difficult for them. But a question I have for you is this. In the last 30 days, who have you shared your faith in Jesus with? Who have you shared the hope that you have in Jesus with? What does that look like in your life? I think today, hopefully, we'll give you some ideas that can help you be a little more effective in this area, maybe feel a little more excited about sharing your faith and your hope in Jesus. I'm going to kick things off with a story about this guy, this dude in the New Testament. His name is Andrew. And he was one of Jesus' 12 main followers, one of Jesus' 12 disciples. And in your notes, it goes like this. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of these men who heard what John said and then followed Jesus. Andrew went to find his brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ, or the Anointed One. Then Andrew brought Simon to meet Jesus. Looking intently at Simon, Jesus said, "Your name is Simon, son of John, but you will be called Cephas," which means Peter. Now, before I'm going to leave off with that story, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that happened to me and my wife it's been about 6 years ago. We took the trip of a lifetime to Europe. In fact, we were there for 24 days. We touched down in 8 different countries and saw some amazing things, some life-changing, memorable stuff. There was many things about that trip that was exciting highlights for me and for my wife as well. And I remember recently we had come across all these pictures that we had taken on my iPad, and we were thumbing through them, and my daughter happened to be there with us, and as we were walking through, it was like, "Oh, this is Stonehenge," and can you imagine how they got those stones up there, and this is what happened, and this is what it was for, and oh, this here is Westminster Abbey. We're talking about London and England here. Oh, this place is called Laycock. The entire city was built out of limestone. And then we go to other parts of Europe, and it's like, oh, this is the Roman Colosseum. And just walking through and talking about every picture. And about 30 minutes into this thing, my daughter's like, "Dad, you don't have to explain every picture." And I realized at that moment that as I was going through these pictures, that all these moments were coming back to life as I was reminded of being there and seeing these very special things that I had only heard about or read about, or never had even done that, and got to see them in person. And so I was telling this story of it was vivid in my mind about what we saw and what it meant, what it was for. And in fact, one of those things that I saw, it was on a trip to Turkey. It was this town called Ephesus. In fact, in the Bible, there's a book called Ephesians, and it's actually a letter by the author of Paul to the Christians in the town of Ephesus. And I remember we got to go to Ephesus, and there's this account in the New Testament in Acts chapter 19 where there's this Ephesus riot. There's a riot in the city. In fact, I got a picture I want to show you guys. This is a picture of the amphitheater in Ephesus where this riot took place. It says they rioted for 2 hours. Now, it doesn't look that big, but as you stand up, I'm about maybe halfway, 2/3 of the way up into this amphitheater. They estimate that this amphitheater would hold 25,000 people. And the people got in this city and they were rioting for 2 hours, chanting this chant, and the city was basically an upheaval. And the Apostle Paul, one of the writers of the New Testament, wanted to go in and address the people, and they wouldn't let him because they were afraid that he was going to get mobbed. And as I stood there in this amphitheater, it was like a spiritual moment. It was sort of like a pilgrimage to know I stood in this place that was mentioned in the Bible, and I could imagine what it looked like that day when the riot happened, and I could imagine Paul at the bottom there wanting to move in and address the crowd and them not letting him do that. And that's just one of many special moments on our trip to Europe. And if you had the time, I'd sit down and I'd talk your ears off about all the things that we did in Europe and all the fun things that we experienced. I would love to go back. Now, it's almost 7 years later, and it feels like a lifetime ago. And my wife and I talk often. Wouldn't it be great to go back there and see some of those same things again? But it's interesting that we take a trip like that and we talk about it till people are blue in the face, hearing us talk about all these things that we saw and all the things that we explored and encountered. Why is it that we don't talk about our faith like that? I mean, I think what Jesus did in my life is impactful, very impactful, life changer, way more than a trip to Europe. But why is it that we're willing to talk about our trip to Disneyland or that concert that we went to way more than we're willing to talk about our faith and the thing that completely transformed our life? I want to give you a couple of ideas today that I think that are ideas that will help you share your faith more effectively. And so if you have your notes out, whether you're looking at the notes tab or you've printed them out and you got them in front of you, you're taking physical notes, this is number one in your notes. The first one is this. Here's the idea number one. Discover a better reason for sharing. Discover a better reason for sharing. Now, in that story that I read about Andrew just a little bit ago, one of the verses there says, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of these men who heard what John said and then followed Jesus. Now, who was this guy John? John is John the Baptist. And Andrew was one of two disciples in this account that were disciples of John the Baptist. They were following him. And just moments ago, in the verses preceding this one that we just read, John spots Jesus walking along. And he says, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And Andrew and this other guy that was following John, they leave John to go follow Jesus because they realize this is Jesus. This is the Son of God. This is the one who can take away the sins of the world. He has the power to do that. He has the power to change lives. And so that was the reason why they were following him. That's the reason why they left John to go follow Jesus. I remember many years ago now, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but when my wife and I started dating for the first time. And I remember those very first phone calls where we were either getting ready to date or we were newly dating, and the palms get sweaty, and you're thinking beforehand what you want to say because you want to be impressive and you want to say the right thing, and you're in awe of this person and you don't want to mess it up. And so you go to dial and you're like, no, I'm not ready. That wasn't the right thing. Okay, and you kind of rehearse it again. What else am I going to say? And you got to get it just right. And then you dial them up and you're like, hello, Sandy? Hey, how you doing? And you're just like, you're walking through this scripted thing that you thought through ahead of time so you could impress them. You know, the other week my wife called me, and she can attest to this. She calls up, and how I answered the phone? I was like, yo. That is how I answered the phone with my wife. It's like the awe was gone. All the thing that drew me in the beginning, I was like, I got to say it's just perfect. I got to get it just right, is gone. But if I stop and think about it, man, the specialness of our relationship, the fact that this year we get to celebrate 20 wonderful years of marriage, it starts bringing up those emotions and those feelings inside of me of when I first started dating her. And it's like, oh, Sandy, it's like exciting. And somehow along the line, we lose that. And it's like, yo, sup? Get too cool. And I think sometime in our relationship with God, the newness, the freshness, the brilliance of what God did in our life, it wears off. And it's kind of like, yo, God, what's up? You kind of lose that. And so then, what's exciting about sharing that? There's not so much there to share. In your notes, I've got a thought for you. When it comes to finding a better reason for sharing, remember this, it's not about guilt. It's about gratitude. And I think sometimes when it comes to sharing our faith, we feel guilty. We feel like, well, the pastor's told me I need to share my faith. We've read it in the Bible. We've heard other people talk. We've got to share your faith. And you might want to do that reluctantly out of guilt because you feel like you're supposed to and it's your obligation. But what if instead you didn't approach it from that perspective? Because that's not our motive. Our motive is, look what God has done in our lives. And why would we not want to share that with every other person we could? And what if we reach down inside and we remembered all the reasons why we find our relationship with God special, and we shared that? And out of gratitude, we shared our faith because we were excited about it. We couldn't keep it inside, much like that trip to Europe I was trying to describe to my daughter just a little bit ago. You know, the author Paul in 2 Corinthians 5:18 writes this. He says, and all of this is a gift from God, who brought us back to himself through Christ. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. That's the task that God has given us. The question I have for you right now is, why do you follow Jesus? Why would you get online services every week? Why would you serve on a team? Why would you give some money of yours away in the name of Jesus? Why would you read your Bible? Why would you spend time in prayer? Why would you do the difficult job of working on your character and developing who you are based on what the Bible teaches? Why go through all that trouble? Why do you follow Jesus? Because I think you need to go back to that reason, that very reason. There's a reason for it. It's not out of obligation. It's not out of guilt. There's no prescription for this is how you live your life and you just got to do that. No, we have a relationship with the one who spoke the world into existence. And he loved us so much that he sacrificed his son Jesus on an actual cross for our actual sins so that we could actually have a relationship with him. And you got to go back and remember that. So my question for you today is what would it take for you to rediscover the wonder in your life of what Jesus did for you? When we have moments of gratitude, I think we like to share them. I think of one, probably it was about 25 years ago. I was on a bus, a yellow old school bus, with a church youth group on our way to summer camp, going down in Northern California into the mountains. And I remember it was just about sundown on a Sunday evening in Yreka, California, the first town you kind of hit as you cross over the California border. And there was this big loud boom and a big fireball that came out of the exhaust pipe on the side of the bus, and then silence as the bus coasted for another mile until we finally pulled off the side of the road, ran out of momentum, and the bus was dead. It wasn't going anywhere. We still had 3 hours before we were reaching the destination we were headed to. And I remember somehow, I don't know who what was because I wasn't in charge, got in contact with the local church there in Yreka. And the church came out and shuttled all 30 of us kids back to their church with all of our luggage. And they put us up in the church overnight. We spent the night in their church warm and cozy in sleeping bags while our bus was being fixed at a shop down the street. And they didn't stop there because the next day they had one of their volunteers for their church bus load us up on their bus and drove us 3 hours one way to the summer camp to drop us off and come back. Here I am 25 years later. I will never forget what they did. And when it was fresh, I was going around town. You wouldn't believe what this church did. I had the gratitude pour it out of me because of what they had done for us. You may have similar stories in your life where someone did something for you and the gratitude just spills out of you because of that. There's a lady in the Bible that Jesus encountered. Her. She was considered in the Bible, she's dubbed as the Samaritan woman. And Jews and Samaritans did not mix. It was kind of a racial divide. You might be familiar with those kinds of things going on today. But Jesus crossed that racial divide, and he had this conversation with this lady that just completely impacted her and changed her life. And she leaves Jesus at this well outside of the city where she was there to draw water. And she runs back into town. It's not in your notes, but she says to the people in the town, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah?" So the people came streaming the village to see him, and it said that Jesus spent a couple days there, and many from the village believed in him because of the testimony of this woman, who, by the way, had a reputation for being a rebel and a troublemaker in her village. Because the gratitude was spilling out of her, she shared that with other people and brought other people to Jesus. What kind of gratitude do you have in your heart towards Jesus now? What has he done in your life? Because you got to go back and think about that. And here's my assignment for you for this week on this before I move on to the next idea. I want you to consider writing down the reasons that you have hope in God. What are the reasons? In other words, what's your spiritual story? What has God done in your life that is so impactful that it makes you want to follow him and live your life for him day in and day out? Yeah, you get it wrong. I know. You're not going to get it perfect. You make mistakes, of course. But you keep getting back up and you keep going for it and you keep trying to discipline yourself. You keep trying to build that character. Keep doing the hard things because you feel like it's the right thing because that's what Jesus wants us to do. Go back and discover again, rediscover the wonder of the story of what Jesus did, not in someone else's life, not in general people's life, but in your life. What did he do for you? We're going to move on now to the second idea, and this is it. Second thing is this: find the closest person and bring them. Find the closest person and bring them. That story we were looking at with Andrew in John chapter 1, John records this. He says, Andrew went to find his brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah, which is the Christ." And then Andrew brought Simon to meet Jesus. Isn't that interesting? Simon goes to the person closest to him, his brother. They had a strong relationship, and goes to him and says, Peter, Simon at that time, "Simon, we've found the Messiah. Come and see him." He went right to the closest person, the person he had the warmest relationship with, and brought him to Jesus. And if you know the story, the impact that it had because Andrew did that. You don't hear a lot about Andrew, one of Jesus' disciples, but Peter, It says in this passage that Jesus changed his name from Simon to Peter. Peter means Petros, rock. And Jesus says, I've changed your name to Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. You will be a cornerstone to my church as I build it. And Peter is one of the most famous characters in Christendom as you go through the New Testament and on and beyond that. Because Andrew took the time to pull someone that he knew that was close to him and said, come and see him. Could he be the Messiah? Is this the one we've been waiting for? The question I have for you this morning is this. Who are you bringing to meet Jesus? Who in your life needs Jesus that you're reaching out to? Who in your life is desperate? Who's hopeless? Broken? Stressed out? Lost? Confused? I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of people that way. You might even feel a little bit of that yourself. But Jesus provides the answer. And the question is, who are you bringing to meet Jesus? We tend to find the furthest person away from us, that's kind of our strategy, and push them away. We go to people we don't have a strong relationship with, and we say something offensive, or we try to basically force them to come and meet Jesus. But who's the person closest to you? The person that if you were to ask them, they'd be the person to be most likely to say yes if you were to invite them to check out church community, or share your faith with. Who is that person? I'll tell you this, especially right now. It's always been true, but especially right now. People are way more open to hearing about the good news of Jesus right now than you might think. And there are people in your life who are craving, they're looking for the answers, and they need someone like you in their life who loves them, who cares for them, who comes to them and says, here's what Jesus has done in my life, and he can do it for you too. And if you don't feel bold enough to do that, just invite them to check out the service. They can go to epiclive.online.church any week, and they can check out service for themselves, and they can experience what God can do in their life. Here's my suggestion with this idea. When it comes to looking for the closest person, don't just share your faith, but also share your hope. In 1 Peter 3:15, Peter, the guy we were just talking about, Simon Peter, he writes these words. He says, and if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and respectful way. So who are the people in your life who are desperately seeking and looking for hope right now, who you can share the hope that you have in Jesus in a gentle and respectful way? Your hope is possibly the greatest gift that you can give the people in your life right now who are far from God. People are longing for something that they can put their hope into right now. And the author, Hal Lindsey, is credited with this quote. He says, man can live about 40 days without food, about 3 days without water, about 8 minutes without air, but only for 1 second without hope. And right now, if you don't sense this, let me tell you that generally speaking, there's an underlying low-grade fear. And, there was this initial fear when COVID came out. It kind of spiked up, and now it's kind of suppressed, and people kind of comfortable or used to where they're at, but there's still this low-grade fear and this lack of hope in people's lives because everything that they thought they could lean into, everything they thought they could depend on has been torn out from underneath them. But that's not true of someone who's a follower of Jesus, because we could either live by fear or we can live by faith. And if we have faith in the one who created the universe by speaking it into existence, the one who sacrificed his son so that we could have a relationship with him, the one whose promises never fail, and he's always been good to us. If we can anchor ourselves in that, our hope is not anchored in our circumstances or the things around us. It's anchored in a person of Jesus. And there's so many people right now who are looking desperately for that. And so if you can provide hope to those people, you provide them possibly the best gift that you could give them. By the way, when it comes to sharing your faith, it's not about spewing out a prescribed program or formula or here's the 3 things you do. It's not about that. Remember, it's about the relationship, and it's about the hope that we have because of the relationship we have in God. And when you share that, don't forget to not just share the facts and the logistical stuff, but share what God is doing in your life. Share the realness of what it means to have a relationship with him. John 20:21 in your notes, John writes these words. He says, as the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. And I don't want you to think of those words as though those words are written to someone else 2,000 years ago. Yes, they were. But I want you to look at those words as that's John penning the words of Jesus, that Jesus is talking to you. As the Father has sent me, Jesus, I'm sending you. and you have been sent. You are a called one. If you consider yourself to be a follower of Jesus, we have a responsibility, we have a mission to share the love of God with everyone we can. The question I have this morning is, who is God sending you to? Who in your life is he sending you to share the hope that you have in him? In your notes at the bottom, there's a couple next steps, several next steps to give you some ideas of how you can put into practice what we're talking about today. And I highly encourage you to put into action, because if you don't put into action anything you hear today, it's not going to help you. You honestly could just kind of click the button, turn it off, and go away, because it's not going to add value to your life if you don't put into action what you're learning. And so today I've got two next steps I want to point out to you. Next step number 2 is this. It's called the Invest and Invite Challenge. And the Invest and Invite Challenge is simply, and in your notes, there's right there in the notes is a slot for 5 names for you to write down. The people in your life, the 5 people closest to you, that if you were to invite them to church, or if you were to share the hope you have in Jesus with these 5 people, they're the ones that are most likely going to say yes to you. Yeah, tell me more about that. That's the 5 people. What we consider to be is the ripe fruit, the people who are ready and ripe, not the people who are not, they were going to resist and be offended by you talking, but the people in your life who are most likely to respond if you were to share your faith with them or invite them to check out your church. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write those 5 names down, and I want you to put those names in a prominent place. Maybe it's on the bathroom mirror, so every time you brush your teeth, you see it. Maybe it's on the center of your steering wheel in your car or your dashboard. Make sure it's safe. But put it in a prominent space that you look at constantly every day, and use that as a reminder to be thinking about those people. And here's what I want you to do for the next 30 days. I challenge you to pray for every person on that list by name and by circumstance for their life, that God would work in their life. And then every day, for 30 days, I want you to look for opportunities to actively serve them, to look for ways to show radical grace, radical love, and radical service to them in their life. And then the final thing is, when the timing is right, when you sense the opportunity is there, when it seems like they're ready, share your faith with them or invite them to come check out church. That's the Invest and Invite Challenge. The second one is next step number 3, and it's just really a simple question. Who can I invite to join me online for services next Sunday? I want you to think, don't just go past this, please. Write down the name of someone, make a difference, make an impact this week, and look for an opportunity to invite that person to come check out the services. That's my challenge to you today. I was thinking this week, imagine that you work for a company that has been working feverishly on a vaccine for the COVID-19 virus. And imagine that, here we are in the summertime, and they're saying at the very, very most optimistic, earliest possible date, maybe by the fall, in October, we could potentially have a vaccine ready for the public. But imagine your company has been secretly testing behind the scenes, and they've got FDA approval, and there's several hundred of you in the room, employees, and they're saying, here's the deal. This thing is ready for release, and you are convinced, everyone in the room is absolutely convinced this vaccine is the right one. This is going to be the thing that helps people and saves people from COVID-19. They tell you, here's the deal. We want to be very benevolent and philanthropic about this, so we are giving away this vaccine. We have unlimited dosages of this vaccine, so anybody who takes this vaccine, we'll give it to as many people. Around the world, we have as many vaccines as are needed. But here's the catch. You guys here in this room, you are the evangelists. You're the ones who have to go out there and let people know that we have the vaccine. And some people aren't going to believe you. They're going to think it's too good to be true. But everyone in this room, we know this vaccine is right and this is going to help people. It's your job to go out there and convince them. Some people will be ready to receive it and say, sign me up, where do I get the vaccine? Others will scoff at you. Some of them will even smear your name in the mud and say it's all a hoax. So many different reactions that people will have to it, but as many as you guys can tell, and then tell them, now it's your job to go and tell people, now you've got the vaccine, you go out there and you share it with other people. We've already had the vaccine. We've already been exposed to COVID-19. This thing works. But you gotta convince them. How many of you would stop because 2 or 3 people just were making fun of you, or scoffed at you, or didn't believe you, or it was hard? No, it would be our responsibility. If we had this opportunity to share this thing that would save so many lives, why would we not do it? And yet we have the hope of the world, Jesus. And we know he's the answer to people's problems. We know that he will transform their life like he did for me, like he did for so many other people that I know. Why would we not share that? Why would we not, with passion, Go out there and never take no for an answer, but continue. If someone turns you down and you've done everything you can to convince them, fine, move on to the next person, but don't stop sharing just because of that. We have the hope of the world. He lives inside of us, and he can be in anybody's life. It's unlimited access. It's free. All we have to do is convince people from our own life, from our own experience, that God is the answer to their problems. He can transform them like he's transformed us. Why would we not do that? It's why we're compelled as a church to do things like the Red Cross blood drive that we've been having, and where we're up to about 10 now, and we keep adding more on there. And every time we add a blood drive, they fill up in record time. Our blood drive coordinator, every time she's like, well, surprise, surprise, it's full once again. She's kind of being tongue-in-cheek with me because she knows every time we put a drive on the schedule, it's going to fill up. So we have this opportunity to make a difference, just to demonstrate love by serving other people in such a practical, easy way. It's why we did things like back in the spring, we raised up over 5,000 snacks. I think it was upwards in the neighborhood of 6,000 snacks for Kotama Elementary School to be able to distribute with the students that didn't have the means to be able to provide food for their family. And I just talked to our connection over there, Joel Hansen, this week, and he was talking about how they're still giving that. That lasted not only through the school year, but they're giving those snacks out still into the summertime. And he said, hey, would you be willing to do that again in the fall? Because it looks like we might be doing some of the similar stuff in the fall. I said, absolutely, Joel. Why? Because we will not stop until every man, woman, boy, and girl has an opportunity to experience the love of Jesus in their life and have an opportunity to receive him into their life. It's why we do things like this thing we do every summer called the Good Neighbor Project. And on Sunday, August 30th, we have scheduled this year's Good Neighbor Project. We're not going to let things stop us. We're moving full force for Jesus. And we're going to go out to the community on that day. We're going to cancel services on August 30th. And instead, we'll be in different locations around the city, partnered with a bunch of churches and organizations around the city all at the same time, expressing the love of Jesus with just simple hands and feet things that we can do around our community to show people that Jesus loves them, and we're expressing that with the way we do things. That's why we do what we do. Because Jesus commands us to. Because when we do, we get blessed by it. Because when we do, other people get a chance to experience the same gratitude that we experience because of what Jesus did for us. If Epic Life Church is going to continue this mission of helping people find and follow Jesus, which is our mission statement, it's going to require all of us to step into action. Not part of us, not some of us, not most of us. It's going to require all of us. So I'm asking you to be ready to engage, to jump into action. Maybe even right now to get you a little bit uncomfortable, because I'm talking to you right now. I'm not talking to the person sitting next to you. I'm not talking to the person who's tuned in on a different computer screen right now or a different phone. I'm talking to you. Will you step up? Will you be someone who's bold with your faith? If Jesus has done something miraculous in your life, if he's changed you, will you step up? Will you get in the game? Will you do this thing of sharing your hope with other people? Will you invite them to church? Will you invest and invite and pray for them daily for the next 30 days? It takes all of us. Romans 1:16 in your notes, Paul writes these words as it relates to sharing our faith. He says, "For I am not ashamed of this good news about Christ. It is the power of God at work, saving everyone who believes." We can't be ashamed of what Jesus is, what he stands for, what he's doing through us. We have to proclaim it boldly. So my assignment to you is will you share the hope of Jesus because of what he has done for you? And I'm giving myself that same challenge. Will I share the hope of Jesus because of what he's done for me? The world is in desperate need of hope right now, today, this week. So much uncertainty, so much unrest, so much hate, so much disunity. And God is looking for us, and he's saying, will you step into the game for such a time as this? Will you step up and do your part? I believe as people of faith, our responsibility to share the hope of Jesus is more important now than ever before. What we do with today's message will separate the players from the pretenders. It'll separate those who are in the game from those who are warming the bench. It'll separate the talkers from the doers. So I'm asking you, which one are you? Are you a player? Are you in the game? Are you a doer? Or are you a pretender? You big talk but no action. Will you step in the game and do what God has asked us to do? Romans 10:13-14. It's not in your notes. Paul writes these words. He says, "Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. But how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them?" That's where we come in. There's people in our life who need us to tell them so they have the opportunity to believe, the opportunity to accept them into his life, and they're not going to get that opportunity. There are people in your life that if you don't do your part in sharing your faith, sharing your hope with them, they may never get another opportunity. If we're not sharing our faith, if we're not inviting people to church, how will they ever have the chance to receive Jesus? I believe this, and this is a strong statement. Sorry if this offends you. But by doing nothing is as if we're saying to the people in our life, you can go to hell. I really believe that. And I don't want to say that to anybody in my life. I want to do my part. I hope that you want to step up. And I want you to know, I'm not saying any of this stuff because I'm trying to put you on a guilt trip. What I want to do is inspire you to remember the wonder of what Jesus did in your life, and that you be compelled. It just come out of you spontaneously. You do it with passion because you remember how wonderful and how awesome of a thing that God did in your life. What would it look like this week if all of us were to demonstrate radical love, radical grace to everyone that we encounter, and when the opportunity arises, we will share the reason for the hope that we have in him? Would you pray with me? God, this morning the message is a little heavy. It's a tough one too. It's hard for us sometimes to be bold about sharing our faith. We're worried about what people might say or how they might view us. Or will we do a good job? Are we qualified to do this? God, I pray that for everyone who's tuned in this morning, that you would embolden them with passion and resolve. As we click off the service this morning, that each one of us would be intentional about being reminded of the wonder. We'd rediscover what you did in our life, and that it would just cause us to well up with emotion and passion. That we can't hold this thing in. We've got to share it. God, help us to be able to express love in practical ways this week, that we would show radical grace to the people in our lives. And God, we ask for opportunities to be able to share the reason for the hope that we have in you with the people closest to us, the people who are most likely to say yes. God, help us, give us success in this area. And God, we just want to say thank you. Thank you that you radically changed our lives. Thank you that we have a reason to share what we have inside of us. We ask these things in your name. And I just want to pause right now and say, if you've never experienced the hope of Jesus in your life and you're tuning in today, today might be the best day for you to say yes to Jesus, to respond to him. And if that's you, I'm going to just say a quick prayer. And I invite you in your own heart while I say it, to say this prayer in your heart of saying, God, I believe in you. I accept your love in my life, your sacrifice for me. I want to have a relationship with you. And as best as I know how from this day forward, I want to live my life for you. And I want to go out and share the grace, the love, the hope that you've given me with everybody else. If that's you, would you pray this prayer with me? God, this morning, I just want to declare that I believe in you. I believe in your life, your death on the cross, and your resurrection. Thank you for saving me. Please, God, forgive me of my sins, of my shortcomings, of my brokenness. Come into my life today. Fill me with your Spirit. Lead me and teach me to follow you. Help me to declare your love to everyone that I come in contact with. I ask these things in your name. Amen.